The desert air hung thick and heavy over forward operating Base Viper as the sun dipped below the jagged mountain range to the west. Lieutenant Commander Jake Reaper Morrison wiped the sweat from his brow and surveyed his domain with quiet satisfaction. 3 weeks. 3 weeks without a single enemy contact. 3 weeks of successful intelligence-gathering missions. 3 weeks of relative peace in a region known for anything but. "Another day in paradise, boys," Morrison announced to his assembled SEAL platoon, his Texas drawl cutting through the evening stillness. The men gathered in the operations center chuckled, their relaxed postures reflecting the growing comfort they'd developed in this remote outpost. Staff Sergeant Mike Bulldog Torres leaned back in his chair, boots propped on a desk. "Sir, I'm starting to think the bad guys forgot we're even here. Maybe we should send them an invitation or something." More laughter rippled through the room. Even Petty Officer First Class Danny Wright, normally the cautious one, cracked a smile. "Don't jinx it, Torres. I'm enjoying the quiet." Morrison pulled up the digital map on the main screen, highlighting their recent patrol routes. "Listen up. Tomorrow's patrol extends to Grid Sector 7-4 Alpha. Intel suggests possible weapons cache in the village of Al-Rashid. We go in quiet, assess, and report back. Nothing fancy." The briefing continued with practiced efficiency. Roles assigned, equipment checked, contingencies planned. Morrison had run operations like this 100 times. Everything felt routine, predictable, safe. The base itself seemed impregnable, guard towers at each corner manned by experienced sentries, motion sensors covering every approach, a quick reaction force on constant standby, and enough firepower to repel a small army. In the far corner of the operations center, away from the camaraderie and banter, sat Samantha Chen. She'd been embedded with the team for 2 months, a CIA Special Activities Division operative officially designated as their intelligence liaison. The SEALs had learned to tune her out. She rarely spoke during briefings, never joined them for meals, and spent most of her time either analyzing satellite imagery or maintaining her equipment in obsessive detail. Chen's fingers moved methodically across her laptop keyboard, her dark eyes scanning reports that no one else bothered to read. She was small, barely 5'4", with an athletic build and black hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. Nothing about her screamed operator, which was exactly how she preferred it. Invisibility was her greatest weapon. "Ghost, you got anything to add?" Morrison asked, more out of courtesy than genuine interest. Chen looked up briefly, her expression unreadable. "Negative, Commander. I'll have updated intel reports by 600. "Outstanding." Morrison turned back to his team. "All right, gentlemen, we've got an early start tomorrow. Get some chow, get some rack time, dismissed." The SEALs filed out, their conversations turning to football scores and care packages from home. None of them noticed Chen packing up her gear, a routine they'd witnessed every evening for weeks. Torres paused at the door, glancing back at her. "You know, Bulldog," Wright muttered beside him, "I don't think I've ever heard her say more than 10 words at a time." "Spooks, man, they're all like that, probably doesn't even know how to smile." They left, their voices fatting into the compound. Chen heard every word. She'd heard similar comments her entire career. Let them think she was just another desk jockey, another CIA bureaucrat dropped into the field. Their assumptions were her camouflage. She finished packing her laptop and secured it in the operations center safe. Then she retrieved a large hard case from beneath her workstation, the one item that had sparked any curiosity among the team when she'd first arrived. Inside lay her custom-built .300 Winchester Magnum rifle, a weapon she'd spent years perfecting. Matched barrel, adjustable cheek rest, custom trigger, and a Schmidt & Bender scope that cost more than most cars. This rifle was an extension of her will, capable of reaching out and touching targets at distances that defied belief. Chen carried the case outside into the cooling desert evening. The base hummed with end-of-day activity. Generators thrummed steadily, providing power to the scattered buildings. Guards rotated shifts at the towers, their movements lazy and predictable. In the mess hall, laughter echoed as the SEALs ate dinner. Everything felt normal, safe, routine. But Chen had learned long ago that comfort bred complacency, and complacency killed. She made her way to the armory building, a two-story concrete structure that housed their weapons and ammunition. A metal ladder bolted to the exterior wall provided access to the roof, her nightly destination. The SEALs had noticed her ritual of climbing up there every evening, but no one had questioned it. If the weird CIA lady wanted to sit on rooftops, that was her business. Chen scaled the ladder with practiced ease, her rifle case slung across her back. The roof offered a 360-degree view of the base and the surrounding terrain. To the north, rocky hills rose in jagged formations. East and west, the desert stretched endlessly. South, the single road that connected them to civilization, a thin lifeline through hostile territory. She set up her position with meticulous care, rifle assembled and placed on its bipod, spotting scope positioned for wide-area surveillance, range finder within easy reach, night vision monoculars checked and ready, spare magazines arranged in precise order. Everything had its place, everything served a purpose. As darkness fell, Chen settled behind her rifle and began her watch. Through the scope, she methodically scanned the hills, the valleys, the approaches to the base. This was her meditation, her way of staying sharp in a world that demanded perfection. One missed detail, one moment of inattention, could mean the difference between life and death. The desert night came alive with sounds, distant jackals calling, wind whistling through rocks, the occasional crack of cooling metal. Normal sounds, familiar sounds. But tonight, something felt different. Chen couldn't articulate exactly what triggered her unease. Maybe it was the way the wind had shifted direction 3 times in the past hour. Maybe it was the absence of the wild dogs that usually prowled the perimeter around midnight. Maybe it was simply instinct, that sixth sense developed over years of operating in the world's most dangerous places. She increased her scan rate, checking and rechecking potential firing positions in the surrounding terrain. Her heart rate remained steady at 60 beats per minute, her breathing calm and controlled. If trouble came, she would be ready. Below her, Fob Viper settled into its nightly routine, the men confident in their safety, trusting in their defenses. None of them knew that their guardian angel sat alone in the darkness above, watching and waiting. None of them knew that in less than 2 hours, everything would change. The desert held its breath, and Ghost held hers with it. The first mortar round announced itself with a whistle that cut through the night like a scream. Chen's head snapped toward the sound, her brain processing the trajectory in milliseconds. She opened her mouth to shout a warning, but the explosion drowned out everything. The guard tower on the northwest corner erupted in a ball of orange flame, the shockwave rolling across the compound like an invisible fist. The 2 SEALs manning the position never had a chance. Incoming! Someone screamed below, but the warning came too late. The second and third mortars hit simultaneously, one obliterating the communications building in a shower of concrete and twisted metal, the other slamming into the generator complex. The base plunged into darkness as the lights died, emergency systems struggling to engage. Then the 4th, 5th, and 6th rounds hit, a symphony of destruction choreographed with terrifying precision. Chen pressed herself flat against the armory roof as shrapnel whined overhead. Her training kicked in instantly. Count the impacts, calculate firing positions, identify the pattern. 6 tubes minimum positioned in the hills to the north, probably 82mm mortars. Professional setup. This wasn't some ragtag insurgent attack. This was planned, rehearsed, deadly. Below, the base transformed into chaos. Morrison burst from his quarters, body armor half-fastened, rifle in hand. QRF, get to your stations. Corpsman, we need you at Tower 1. Someone get me comms. His voice carried the authority of years in combat, but Chen could hear the edge of surprise beneath it. They'd been caught completely off guard. The seventh mortar round hit the mess hall. The building seemed to lift off its foundation before collapsing inward, flames licking from shattered windows. Men stumbled from the wreckage, some helping wounded comrades, others clutching injuries of their own. Then the small arms fire began. Muzzle flashes erupted from 3 directions simultaneously, north, east, and west. The enemy had timed their assault perfectly, using the mortar barrage to cover their approach. Tracers cut through the darkness like angry red hornets, finding flesh and sandbag with equal efficiency. Contact north, multiple hostiles breaching the perimeter. East side's compromised, they're through the wire. West Tower, we're taking heavy fire. The radio chatter devolved into a cacophony of desperate voices, each reporting a new crisis. Chen watched from above as enemy fighters poured through the breached perimeters, their movements coordinated and purposeful. They wore no uniforms, but their tactics screamed military training. Bounding overwatch, suppressing fire, grenades employed to clear strong points. These weren't farmers with AK-47s. These were soldiers. Torres led the quick reaction force toward the east breach, his team moving with practiced efficiency despite the chaos. They made it 15 meters before a heavy machine gun opened up from the hills, the distinctive bark of a Russian PKM filling the night. Torres dove behind a concrete barrier as rounds chewed through the sandbags around him. 2 of his men weren't fast enough. They went down hard, their bodies jerking as bullets found them. "We're pinned, we can't move," Torres screamed into his radio. Morrison rallied a group of SEALs near the operations center, attempting to organize a defense, but the enemy had planned for this too. Grenades arced over the compound walls, forcing the Americans to scatter. An RPG streaked from the darkness, missing Morrison by inches and exploding against the armory wall below Chen. The entire building shook, nearly throwing her from the roof. She gripped her rifle tighter, her knuckles white. Through her night vision scope, she counted at least 30 enemy fighters inside the wire, with more advancing. The SEALs were outnumbered, outgunned, and caught in a kill zone designed specifically for them. "Command, this is Viper 6. We are under heavy attack. I repeat, heavy attack. We need immediate QRF and air support." Morrison's voice crackled over the radio, but Chen knew the truth. Help was at least 30 minutes away, probably longer. The base would be overrun in 10. Wright attempted to reach a fallen teammate but was driven back by withering fire. Chen watched through her scope as an enemy squad leader, identifiable by the radio on his back, directed his men with hand signals. They were executing a textbook assault, collapsing the American defense from multiple angles, driving the SEALs into a tightening noose. Another mortar barrage hit, this time targeting the ammunition bunker. The rounds fell short, but not by much. They were adjusting fire, walking the mortars closer to critical targets. When they found the ammunition, the entire base would become a crater. Chen's mind raced through her options. Her orders from Langley had been crystal clear: observe and report only. Do not engage in combat operations. She was an intelligence asset, not a trigger puller. If she exposed herself, she'd compromise her cover, potentially burn a network of sources that had taken years to develop. The bureaucrats back in Virginia would be furious. But those bureaucrats weren't watching good men die in front of them. Through her scope, she saw Morrison take a round to his body armor, the impact spinning him around. He stayed on his feet, but staggered. Young Danny Wright was pinned behind a burning vehicle, flames creeping closer, enemy fighters advancing on his position from 2 sides. Torres and his remaining men were trapped, the machine gun keeping them immobilized while enemy fighters maneuvered to flank them. The base's defenses were crumbling. In 5 minutes, maybe less, it would be a massacre. Chen's hand moved to her rifle, fingers wrapping around the familiar grip. She'd made hundreds of shots in her career, eliminated targets from distances that seemed impossible. But those had all been sanctioned operations, approved missions with legal authorities signed in triplicate. This would be different. This would be her choice, her decision, her responsibility. She thought of her instructors at the farm, the CIA's training facility. They taught her to be a ghost, to operate in the shadows, to never leave fingerprints. "You're not a soldier," they'd said. "You're an intelligence officer. Know the difference." But she'd also been a Marine before the CIA recruited her, and Marines didn't abandon their brothers in combat. Below, an enemy fighter stepped into the open, raising his rifle to shoot right in the back. The young SEAL had no idea death was 3 seconds away. Chen made her decision. She settled behind her rifle, her breathing automatically slowing to the rhythm she'd practiced 10,000 times. Right eye to the scope, left eye open for peripheral awareness. Crosshairs found the enemy fighter's center mass. Range, 287 meters. Wind, negligible. Elevation, accounted for. Her finger moved to the trigger, taking up the slack with practiced precision. The CIA could fire her tomorrow. Washington could recall her, burn her career, throw her to the congressional wolves. None of that mattered now. Only the shot mattered. Chen exhaled half a breath and gently pressed the trigger. The rifle recoiled against her shoulder with familiar authority, the suppressor reducing the sound to a sharp crack that was lost in the surrounding chaos. Through her scope, she watched the enemy fighter drop like a puppet with cut strings, dead before he hit the ground. Ghost had entered the fight. And the enemy had no idea what was coming for them. Wright scrambled away from the burning vehicle, completely unaware of how close he'd come to death. Chen didn't wait for his thanks. She was already acquiring her next target. The PKM machine gunner, the one pinning down Tors and the quick reaction force. Through her night vision scope, she could see him clearly at 612 meters, nestled behind a rocky outcropping in the hills. He was good, firing controlled bursts, conserving ammunition while maximizing suppression. His assistant gunner fed the belt, while a spotter called out targets, a professional crew. Chen adjusted her scope's elevation, factoring in the upward angle to the target. The wind had picked up slightly, coming from her right at approximately 4 miles per hour. She compensated, moving her point of aim 2 inches left. The machine gunner's head filled her reticle. The rifle spoke again. The gunner's head snapped back and the PKM went silent. Before the assistant gunner could react, Chen had already cycled the bolt and acquired him. Second shot. He collapsed across the ammunition belt. The spotter began to scramble away, panicked, searching for the threat he couldn't see. Third shot. He made it 3 steps. "Machine guns down," Tors shouted over the radio, disbelief evident in his voice. "I don't know what happened, but it's down. Moving now." The quick reaction force surged forward, finally able to maneuver. But Chen was already hunting her next target. An enemy squad leader stood near the eastern breach, directing his fighters with confident hand signals. He was the coordinator, the one organizing the assault on that flank. Chen watched him through her scope for 3 seconds, reading his body language, confirming his importance. Then she sent a 190-grain bullet through his chest at 403 meters. The man crumpled, and immediately the fighters around him hesitated, confused. Who was in charge now? Where were the orders? The assault on the eastern perimeter faltered as they lost cohesion. Morrison noticed immediately. East side slowing down, push them back, go, go, go. A group of SEALs counterattacked, their training overcoming their earlier shock. They moved as a unit, laying down suppressing fire, using grenades to clear enemy positions. The eastern breach began to stabilize. But Chen couldn't celebrate. Through her scope, she spotted the mortar spotter in the northern hills, calling in corrections to walk the rounds onto the ammunition bunker. He was 731 meters out, partially concealed behind a boulder, only his head and shoulders visible. A difficult shot, but necessary. She controlled her breathing, letting her heart rate settle. At this distance, her own pulse could throw off the shot. The crosshairs wavered slightly with each heartbeat. She timed it, waiting for the natural respiratory pause between breaths. The moment came, that fraction of a second when the body was perfectly still. The trigger broke clean. The spotter dropped his radio and fell backward, disappearing behind the boulder. The mortar fire immediately became erratic, rounds falling randomly across the compound instead of concentrated on critical targets. Without accurate spotting, the mortar crews were firing blind, wasting ammunition. Chen methodically worked her way through high-value targets. An enemy fighter carrying an RPG launcher, eliminated at 521 meters. Another squad leader trying to rally his men near the western breach, down at 445 meters. A sniper setting up in a building outside the wire, probably planning to target Morrison, neutralized at 689 meters before he could take position. Each shot was calculated, precise, economical. No wasted ammunition, no unnecessary risks. She moved through her magazine with machine efficiency, her fingers working the bolt action with unconscious grace born from thousands of hours of practice. Below, Morrison fought like a man possessed, but even in the midst of combat, his tactical mind was processing the battlefield. Enemy fighters were dropping without explanation. Coordinated assaults were falling apart as leaders died mysteriously. The machine gun that had pinned his men had gone silent without anyone approaching it. Someone was helping them, someone with exceptional skill. "Right, did you see who took out that fighter behind you?" Morrison barked into his radio. "Negative, sir. 1 second he was there, next second he was down. I didn't hear the shot." Morrison's eyes scanned the compound, searching. Then he looked up, and through the smoke and darkness he saw her. A silhouette on the armory roof, prone behind a rifle, utterly still except for the smooth motion of working the bolt between shots. Ghost. The CIA spook who barely spoke, who kept to herself, who they'd all dismissed as just another intelligence analyst playing soldier. She was the one turning the tide of battle. "Ghost is in the fight," Morrison breathed into the radio, his voice carrying a mixture of awe and gratitude. "The sniper on the armory, she's on our side. All call signs the sniper is friendly." Chen heard the transmission through her earpiece but didn't respond. She was already tracking a new threat, a 4-man team attempting to flank Morrison's position from the north. They moved tactically, using cover effectively, clearly experienced fighters, but they hadn't accounted for the angel of death watching from above. She took them in sequence, working from back to front so the lead man wouldn't immediately realize his team was being eliminated. 4th man down. 3rd man turned to check on his teammate down. 2nd man started to raise his weapon toward an unknown threat down. The lead man finally understood something was wrong and tried to run down. 4 shots, 4 kills, 11 seconds. But that last shot had been different. Chen had fired from a slightly different angle, and the muzzle flash, even with her suppressor, had been visible against the darkness. She saw enemy fighters in the compound beginning to look toward her position, trying to identify the source of their casualties. She'd maintained perfect concealment until now, firing from deep shadow with minimal signature. But you couldn't kill 23 men without eventually being noticed. "Sniper, enemy sniper in the compound," someone shouted in Arabic. Chen's language training allowed her to understand perfectly. "On the tall building, find and kill." Rounds began sparking off the metal roof around her. An enemy marksman had spotted her position and was engaging, his shots walking closer. Chen rolled left just as a bullet struck where her head had been a moment before, the round punching through the thin metal roofing. Her position was compromised. Chen grabbed her rifle and gear bag, staying low as more rounds whipped overhead. She scrambled toward the roof's edge, sliding down a drainage pipe with her rifle slung across her back. Her boots hit the ground just as an RPG streaked over her previous position, exploding against the armory's roof with a thunderous blast. They knew where she'd been. Now they'd hunt where she was going. Chen sprinted through the shadows between buildings, her mind already calculating new firing positions. She needed elevation, concealment, and good sight lines. The operations center had a second-floor window that might work, or perhaps the damaged guard tower if it was still structurally sound. But through the chaos, her trained ears picked up a new sound, a vehicle engine, pushing hard, growing louder. She risked a glance toward the northern perimeter and felt ice flood her veins. A technical truck, its bed loaded with what could only be explosives, was racing through the breach at full speed. The driver hunched over the wheel, his face set with fanatical determination. The truck's path pointed directly at the fuel depot, over 5,000 gallons of diesel and aviation fuel. If that truck reached its target, the explosion would kill everyone in the compound. The blast wave alone would level every building within 200 meters. Chen saw Morrison spot the threat at the same moment. His voice cracked over the radio. VBIED, vehicle bomb approaching fuel depot. Someone stop that truck. SEALs opened fire, their rounds sparking off the technical's reinforced cab. TORs raised the platoon's last RPG launcher, aimed and pulled the trigger. Nothing. The weapon was jammed, probably damaged in the fighting. The truck was 400 meters from the depot and accelerating, weaving between obstacles and debris. It would reach the target in less than 30 seconds. Chen's rifle came up automatically, her body moving before her conscious mind fully processed the decision. She dropped to one knee behind a concrete barrier, bracing her left elbow against the wall for stability. Through her scope, she tracked the speeding vehicle, watching it bounce and swerve across the rough terrain. Moving target, low light, extreme time pressure. She needed to shoot the driver through the windshield, a tiny target inside a moving vehicle traveling at approximately 40 miles per hour across uneven ground. The mathematics scrolled through her mind: lead distance, elevation drop, wind drift, vehicle speed and direction. But this wasn't a classroom exercise. This was 3 seconds to save everyone she'd been fighting to protect. Chen's breathing slowed, even as her heart pounded. She found that quiet place inside herself, the calm center where doubt and fear couldn't reach. The crosshairs tracked the windshield, leading the vehicle's movement. 3 rounds left in her magazine, 3 chances to stop catastrophe. The world narrowed to the scope's view. Nothing else existed, not the battle raging around her, not the bullets seeking her flesh, not the voice screaming in her head that this shot was impossible. Only the shot existed. Ghost exhaled and pressed the trigger. The first round shattered the windshield in an explosion of safety glass, spiderwebbing across the driver's field of view. The truck swerved violently left, the driver instinctively flinching, but his foot remained heavy on the accelerator. 350 meters from the fuel depot. Chen's hands moved with mechanical precision, cycling the bolt, ejecting the spent casing, chambering the next round. The entire motion took less than a second. She reacquired the target through her scope. The truck had changed angle, presenting a more difficult shot profile. Second round. The bullet punched through the damaged windshield and caught the driver in the right shoulder, spinning him in his seat. The truck slowed marginally as his body jerked, but momentum and determination kept the vehicle lurching forward. Blood sprayed across the interior of the cab, visible even through Chen's scope. 200 meters from the depot. 1 round left. Morrison watched from across the compound, his breath caught in his throat. Every SEAL in the base had stopped firing, their attention fixed on the truck barreling toward certain destruction. If Ghost missed this shot, they were all dead. Simple mathematics. Chen didn't think about the pressure. Thinking meant hesitation, and hesitation meant failure. Her mind existed in a state of pure calculation. The truck's reduced speed, the driver's compromised position, the angle of approach, wind drift, bullet drop at this extended range. The crosshairs settled on a point 6 inches ahead of where the driver's head currently was, accounting for the vehicle's forward motion. Her finger took up the trigger's slack, feeling for that perfect break point she'd memorized through 10,000 repetitions. Time seemed to slow. She could see individual pieces of debris bouncing off the truck's hood, could count the bullet holes stitched across the windshield, could see the driver struggling to maintain control with one functioning arm. 150 meters from the depot, Chen found that sacred pause between heartbeats, that microsecond of absolute stillness. The trigger broke clean, almost surprising her with its smoothness. The .300 Winchester Magnum round crossed the distance in a fraction of a second, traveling at over 2,800 feet per second. It entered through the shattered windshield, passed through the driver's skull just above his left eye, and exited through the rear window in a spray of crimson. The driver's body went instantly slack, his dead weight falling against the steering wheel. The truck veered sharply left, tires screaming, the vehicle going into a skid across the rough ground. It careened sideways, missing the fuel depot's main tank by less than 20 feet, and slammed into a concrete safety barrier with a sickening crunch of metal. Silence. Every man in Fob Viper held his breath, waiting for the explosion that would vaporize them all. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Nothing. The truck sat crumpled against the barrier, steam hissing from its ruptured radiator, but the payload remained inert. The crash had damaged the detonator, leaving hundreds of pounds of explosives impotent against the barrier. Jesus Christ, Torres whispered, his voice carrying across the radio. She just saved every single one of us. Morrison found Chen through the smoke and chaos, still kneeling behind the concrete barrier, her rifle's barrel still pointed toward the disabled truck. Even from 50 meters away, he could see her hands were rock steady, no tremor of adrenaline or fear. "Ghost," Morrison said into his radio, his voice thick with emotion he didn't bother to hide. "That was the most incredible shooting I've ever witnessed. You just—" "Commander, enemy fighters breaking off from the main assault," Chen interrupted, her voice calm and professional. "6 men moving toward my position. They've identified me as a threat." And just like that, the moment of relief evaporated. Chen had been so focused on the VBIED that she hadn't noticed the enemy's reaction to her shots. But now, through her scope, she could see an enemy commander, probably the overall assault leader, pointing directly at her position and screaming orders. 6 fighters immediately detached from their units, weapons at the ready, moving with predatory purpose toward the buildings where she'd taken her last shots. They'd seen the muzzle flash. They knew approximately where she was, and they were coming to kill her. "Fall back to the operations center," Morrison ordered. "We'll cover you." "Negative, Commander," Chen replied, already moving. "Your men need to hold the perimeters. I can handle this." She didn't wait for his response. Chen slung her rifle across her back. The weapon was too long for close-quarters combat, and drew her suppressed Glock 19 from her thigh holster. 15 rounds in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. Against 6 trained fighters, the mathematics weren't in her favor. But mathematics didn't account for surprise, aggression, and the advantage of knowing the terrain. Chen sprinted between buildings, keeping to the deepest shadows, her footfalls silent despite her speed. Behind her, she could hear the enemy team splitting up, communicating in rapid Arabic. They were using proper small-unit tactics, clearing corners, checking angles, moving as a coordinated unit. Professional soldiers, just like she'd suspected. She ducked into the damaged communications building, glass crunching under her boots. The interior was a disaster, broken equipment, collapsed ceiling tiles, exposed wiring sparking intermittently. But Chen had studied this building's layout her first day at Fob Viper. She knew every room, every corridor, every potential exit. Through a shattered window, She watched two fighters approach from the east, their weapons sweeping methodically. They were being cautious now, understanding that the sniper who decimated their force was dangerous up close as well. Chen controlled her breathing, making herself perfectly still behind an overturned desk. Her finger rested alongside the Glock's trigger guard, not on the trigger itself, discipline preventing accidental discharge. She could hear them getting closer, boots crunching on debris, one man whispering to the other. They entered through the front doorway, tactical lights mounted on their rifles cutting through the darkness. Chen remained motionless, barely breathing, letting them move past her position. They cleared the first room, then the second, their attention focused forward. Classic mistake. They'd failed to properly clear their six. Chen rose silently from behind the desk, her pistol already extended in a two-handed grip. Two shots, so close together they sounded like one. Both suppressed rounds took the trailing fighter in the back of the head. He collapsed without a sound. The lead fighter spun around, his rifle coming up, his eyes wide with shock. But Chen was already moving, sidestepping offline from his muzzle while her pistol tracked him with mechanical precision. Two more shots, center mass, just as she'd been trained. He staggered backward, his rifle clattering to the floor, and fell. 4 rounds expended, 12 remaining, 4 enemies still hunting. Chen grabbed the closest fighter's radio, listening to the rapid Arabic chatter. The other 4 had heard something, maybe the bodies falling, maybe the suppressed shots, and were converging on her position from multiple directions. She had perhaps 30 seconds before they arrived in force. Chen moved deeper into the building, finding a stairwell that led to a crawl space beneath the floor. It was barely 2 feet high, filled with pipes and electrical conduits, never meant for human access. Perfect. She squeezed into the narrow gap, pulling herself forward on her elbows with her pistol in one hand. Above her, she heard boots thundering into the building, voices shouting commands. They'd found their dead comrades. She's here somewhere, find her. The commander wants her head. Through gaps in the floorboards, Chen could see their boots as they searched frantically, tearing through rooms, overturning furniture, firing randomly into shadows. They were scared now. The predators had become prey, and they knew it. But they were also growing desperate and angry. Desperate men made mistakes, but they also became unpredictable and dangerous. Chen crawled silently through the darkness beneath their feet, like a ghost moving through walls. She emerged from the crawl space in the building's western corner, pulling herself up through a maintenance hatch into what had been the server room. The equipment was destroyed, but the room offered multiple exits and good sight lines. She could hear them still searching the eastern rooms, their search pattern becoming more frantic. In their panic, they'd lost proper tactical discipline. They were bunching up, making noise, becoming targets instead of hunters. Chen smiled grimly in the darkness. She'd spent her entire career operating alone in hostile territory, outmaneuvering men who underestimated her. These 4 were skilled, but they'd made the critical error of hunting someone who'd been trained by the best ghost makers in the world. The CIA hadn't sent her to Fob Viper to hide in corners. They'd sent her because she was a weapon, precise, silent, and absolutely lethal when circumstances demanded. And right now, circumstances demanded everything she had. Through the stolen radio, she heard one of the hunters whisper, "Hakim, take your man and check the western rooms. We'll cover the exits. She's still in here. She has nowhere to run." Chen's grip tightened on her pistol. They were right about one thing. She wasn't running. She was hunting. Hakim and his partner moved cautiously toward the western rooms, their rifles raised, fingers on triggers. Chen watched them through a crack in the server room door, calculating angles and distances. Hakim was the leader, older, more experienced, moving with the confidence of a veteran. His partner was younger, nervous, his rifle wavering slightly as he swept corners. The nervous ones were dangerous. They shot at shadows. Chen let them pass within 10 feet of her position, controlling her breathing to absolute silence. Her heartbeat was steady at 58 beats per minute, slower than most people at rest. Years of meditation and training had given her almost supernatural control over her body's stress responses. Through the stolen radio pressed to her ear, she heard the other two hunters taking positions at the building's exits. They were setting a trap, planning to flush her out and kill her in a crossfire. Standard small unit tactics, effective against most targets. But Chen wasn't most targets. She waited until Hakim and his partner entered the communications equipment room, a dead end with only one exit. Then she moved, sliding silently from the server room and positioning herself in the hallway they just passed through. Now she was behind them, between them and their escape route. The hunter had become the hunted. Chen heard Hakim whisper sharply in Arabic, "Nothing here, room is clear." Then louder into his radio, "Western section is empty, she must have moved too." Chen stepped into the doorway behind them, her pistol already extended. "Looking for me." Both men spun, but they were too slow, too surprised. Chen fired twice at the younger fighter, both rounds hitting center mass before he could even raise his rifle. He went down hard, his weapon clattering across the floor. Hakim was faster, his experience saving him. He dove sideways behind a metal desk as Chen's next shot sparked off the edge where his head had been. He returned fire blindly around the corner, his AK-47 chattering on full automatic, bullets punching through drywall and ceiling tiles. Chen had already moved, rolling left into an adjoining room as rounds tracked where she'd been standing. Hakim was good. He kept firing, denying her the doorway, buying himself time to reposition. "She's here, Western equipment room, I need backup now," Hakim screamed into his radio. Through the walls, Chen heard the other two hunters abandon their positions at the exits and start running toward the Western section. She had maybe 20 seconds before they arrived, and she'd be fighting 3 armed men in close quarters. She needed to end this fast. Chen pulled a flashbang grenade from her vest, standard issue that she'd liberated from the armory weeks ago. She pulled the pin, counted 2 seconds, then threw it blind around the corner into Hakim's room. The explosion was deafening in the enclosed space, the flash overwhelming even through walls. Chen moved immediately, rounding the corner while Hakim was still disoriented, his hands clutching his face, his rifle forgotten on the floor. She didn't give him a chance to recover. 2 shots, center mass. Hakim collapsed against the wall and slid to the floor, his eyes wide with shock and pain. "How?" he gasped in Arabic. "How is one woman?" Chen didn't answer. She was already moving, stripping Hakim's AK-47 from his dead hands and checking the magazine. 23 rounds remaining. She slung the rifle across her chest and retrieved her Glock, press-checking to confirm a round was chambered. The other 2 hunters burst into the hallway from opposite directions, catching her in a potential crossfire. But Chen had anticipated this. She'd positioned herself in a doorframe with concrete walls on both sides. The only angle they could shoot her from was head-on, and that meant exposing themselves. The hunter from the east corridor appeared first, and Chen put 2 rounds through his chest before he fully cleared the corner. He fell backward, his rifle firing a wild burst into the ceiling as he went down. 1 left. The final hunter had stopped, pressed against the wall in the western corridor, breathing hard. Chen could hear him whispering prayers in Arabic, his voice shaking. He knew he was alone now, knew his entire team was dead, knew that death was waiting for him around the corner. "Drop your weapon and surrender," Chen called out in perfect Arabic. "You don't have to die here." For a moment, she thought he might actually do it. Then she heard his weapon clatter to the floor. "I'm coming out, don't shoot, I surrender." Chen kept her pistol trained on the corner, her finger resting on the trigger. Something felt wrong. The surrender came too quickly, too easily. The fighter stepped into view, hands raised, and Chen saw the grenade in his right hand, pin already pulled, his thumb holding down the spoon. A suicide attack. If she shot him, he'd drop the grenade and they'd both die. Now we both meet Allah, he said, his eyes wild with fanatical determination. Chen's mind raced through the mathematics. The grenade had a 4 to 5 second fuse once the spoon released. She was approximately 15 feet away. The kill radius was 5 meters. If he dropped it, she had maybe 2 seconds to get behind substantial cover. Not enough time. You don't want to do this, Chen said calmly, her pistol still aimed at his chest. You're young, you have family, this isn't your fight. This is exactly my fight. You Americans come to our land, kill our people. I'm not American, Chen interrupted. She was technically, but her ethnic Chinese features made the lie believable. I'm just someone trying to survive, same as you. We don't have to die in this room. The fighter hesitated, confusion flickering across his face. His thumb wavered on the grenade spoon. Chen saw her opening. She holstered her pistol in one smooth motion, a gesture of peace, of trust. Then she spoke in Mandarin, knowing he wouldn't understand, but hoping the unfamiliar language would reinforce her lie. I have a daughter, she said, then switched back to Arabic. Do you have family? Someone waiting for you? My mother in Damascus. She wants you to come home, not die in some destroyed building for people who sent you here but stayed safe themselves. The fighter's hand trembled, sweat poured down his face. They said Americans killed my father in an airstrike, they said. They lied to you, Chen said softly. They lie to boys like you every day, send you to die while they hide in caves. Your mother needs you. Honor your father by living, not by dying for liars. For a long moment the fighter stood frozen, the grenade still live in his hand. Then, slowly, carefully, he slid the pin back into the grenade and lowered his hands. Chen exhaled slowly, not realizing she'd been holding her breath. Smart choice. Sit down against that wall, don't move. The fighter complied, sitting heavily, his whole body shaking with delayed shock. Chen secured his weapons and zip-tied his hands behind his back, then radioed Morrison. Commander, western sector of comms building is clear. 6 enemy fighters neutralized, 1 prisoner secured. Say again, Ghost, did you say 6? Confirmed. 6 hostiles down, 1 captured. I'm RTB to Operations Center. Morrison's voice carried undisguised awe. Outstanding work, but Ghost, we've got a new problem. What now? Enemy is pulling back from most positions, but our observation post just reported another technical truck approaching from the south road. Looks like they brought a backup plan. Chen felt ice crystallize in her stomach. She was out of rifle ammunition. Her Glock had maybe 8 rounds left. The captured AK-47 had 23, but that was a short-range weapon, useless against a distant vehicle. Can QRF engage? Torres took shrapnel to the leg. His team is combat ineffective. Wright's squad is holding the eastern breach. If they leave, we'll be overrun again. I need you back on that rifle, Ghost. Chen sprinted from the communications building toward the armory, where her rifle still lay on the roof with empty magazines. Commander, I'm black on rifle ammunition. Used everything on the first truck. Silence on the radio. Then, how long to reach the ammunition bunker and reload? Chen calculated the distance, the time to find the right ammunition, load magazines, return to position. 3 minutes, maybe 4. Technical will be in effective RPG range of the base in 2 minutes. We're out of time. Chen burst into the armory building and took the stairs 3 at a time, her mind racing through impossible solutions. She emerged onto the roof and grabbed her rifle, the weapon feeling useless without ammunition. Below, she could see the approaching technical, dust roiling behind it in the early morning darkness. Morrison's voice crackled again. All positions brace for impact. That truck's carrying another load of explosives. We can't stop it. The SEALs started falling back to hardened positions, preparing for the blast. Some were helping wounded teammates to bunkers. Others were simply finding peace with the end, standing tall, refusing to hide. Chen stared at her empty rifle, then at the approaching truck, then back at the rifle. An impossible idea formed in her mind, so desperate, so unlikely to work that even suggesting it seemed insane. But desperate times demanded desperate solutions. And Ghost had one final trick to play. Chen's hands moved frantically across the armory roof, searching through the debris from the earlier RPG strike. Spent brass casings, broken equipment, shattered roof tiles, but no ammunition. Her rifle was a precision instrument designed for one specific cartridge. Winchester Magnum. Nothing else would work. The technical truck was 90 seconds out, closing fast. "Ghost, what's your status?" Morrison's voice held barely controlled desperation. Chen didn't answer. Her mind was running through every possibility, every option, every impossible solution. Then her eyes fell on something she'd forgotten. The enemy sniper she'd killed earlier, the one who'd been setting up outside the wire. She'd neutralized him at 689 meters before he could take his shot. "Commander, the enemy sniper I eliminated earlier. Did anyone recover his weapon?" "Negative, body still out there, northern perimeter. Why?" Chen was already moving, slinging her rifle and scrambling down from the armory roof. What kind of rifle was he carrying? "How the hell should I wait?" Morrison paused. "Right, you had eyes on that sniper position. What was he carrying?" Wright's voice came through, strained from pain. "Looked like a Dragunov SVD, sir. Standard Russian marksman rifle." Chen's heart sank. Dragunov used 7.62 x 54 MAR rounds, completely incompatible with her weapon. Useless. 60 seconds. She sprinted toward the northern perimeter anyway, her boots pounding across the compound. Maybe the sniper had a backup weapon. Maybe there was something she could use, maybe. "Ghost, you've got 45 seconds before that truck is in our perimeter," Morrison shouted. "Whatever you're planning, do it now." Chen reached the damaged section of the northern wall and vaulted over the sandbags. The enemy sniper's body lay crumpled behind a rocky outcrop exactly where she'd left him, his Dragunov still clutched in his dead hands. She rolled him over, desperately searching his gear. 2 spare magazines for the Dragunov, a pistol, grenades, water bottle, but no. Wait. Strapped to his back was a second rifle case. Chen tore it open, her hands shaking with adrenaline, and felt her breath catch. A Macmillan TAC-50, an American-made .50 caliber rifle, probably captured from a previous engagement or bought on the black market. And next to it, a cloth bandolier containing 5 massive rounds of .50 BMG ammunition. 30 seconds. Chen grabbed the rifle and ammunition, not questioning her impossible luck. The weapon was heavier than her own, the ergonomics different, the scope unfamiliar. She trained on .50 caliber rifles at Quantico years ago, but had always preferred the lighter, more precise .300 Win Mag. But beggars couldn't be choosers. She sprinted back toward the base, loading a single round into the TAC-50's chamber as she ran. Through the gaps in the perimeter wall, she could see the technical truck now, its engine roaring, less than 800 meters out and closing at 50 miles per hour. 20 seconds. Chen threw herself down behind a concrete barrier at the northern perimeter's edge, deploying the rifle's bipod. Her hands flew across the unfamiliar weapon, checking the scope, testing the bolt action, trying to build an instant mental model of how this rifle would shoot compared to her own. The scope was zeroed for 500 meters. She could tell from the elevation adjustment markings. But the truck was currently 600 meters out and accelerating toward her. She'd need to hold over, compensate for the different ballistics, account for the fact that she'd never fired this specific rifle before. 15 seconds. Morrison's voice. Ghost, tell me you have something. Chen's eye found the scope, her breathing automatically slowing despite the insane time pressure. The truck filled her view, a Toyota Hilux with its bed loaded with barrels that could only be explosives. The driver was hunched forward, one hand on the wheel, the other holding what looked like a trigger device. A dead man's switch. If she killed him, his hand would release and detonate the explosives immediately. 10 seconds. She needed to hit the engine block, disable the vehicle without killing the driver. But the engine was a small target on a vehicle moving at highway speeds across rough terrain, and she was using an unfamiliar rifle with unknown zero and ballistics. The mathematics were impossible. I can't stop it, Chen whispered, the admission tearing at her soul. Below her, she could see SEALs helping wounded men into bunkers, making peace with their final moments. Torres was praying. Wright was writing something on a piece of paper, probably a final letter home. 7 seconds. Chen's finger moved to the trigger anyway. Even if the shot was impossible, she had to try. Failure wasn't an option when good men's lives hung in the balance. She steadied her breathing, found that quiet center, let the chaos fall away. The crosshairs settled on the truck's engine block, leading the target to account for its speed and direction. But something felt wrong. The angle was bad, the armor plating protecting the engine. The shot wouldn't penetrate deep enough to disable the vehicle. 5 seconds. Then Chen saw it. The front left tire, compressed from the weight of the explosives, spinning at high RPM. If she could blow the tire at speed, the truck would lose control, flip, maybe detonate away from the base, or maybe crash without triggering the explosives. Maybe wasn't good enough, but maybe was all she had. 3 seconds. Chen shifted her aim to the tire, calculating the lead time. The .50 BMG round traveled at 2,800 feet per second. The truck was moving at approximately 75 feet per second. At current range of 400 meters, she needed to lead by roughly 12 inches, account for wind drift, compensate for the unfamiliar scope zero. 2 seconds. Her finger touched the trigger. This was it, the culmination of every hour spent training, every shot fired in practice, every mission that had led to this single moment. All her skill, all her training, all her experience condensed into one impossible shot with an unfamiliar weapon at a moving target while exhausted and running on pure adrenaline. The world crystallized into perfect clarity. She could see individual rocks bouncing off the truck's hood, could see the driver's knuckles white on the steering wheel, could see the sun just beginning to peek over the eastern mountains, painting the desert gold. 1 second. Chen found that sacred pause between heartbeats. The trigger broke. The .50 caliber round roared from the barrel with a muzzle blast that shook dust from the concrete barrier. The massive bullet crossed the distance in less time than it took to blink. The front left tire exploded in a spectacular burst of rubber and steel. The truck lurched violently to the left, the driver overcorrecting, the vehicle going into an uncontrolled spin at 75 miles per hour. Time seemed to slow as the truck skidded sideways, tipping onto 2 wheels, the driver visible through the window, his face frozen in shock, the dead man's switch still clutched in his hand. The truck flipped. Once, twice, 3 times. Each rotation seemed to take an eternity, the vehicle tumbling end over end, throwing debris and barrels of explosives across the desert floor. Every person in Fob Viper held their breath, waiting for the detonation that would end them all. The truck came to rest on its roof, 150 meters from the perimeter, crushed and broken. Steam hissed from the destroyed engine. Fuel leaked across the sand. But no explosion. Through her scope, Chen could see the driver, still alive, crawling from the wreckage, the trigger device lost somewhere in the tumbling chaos. He staggered a few steps, then collapsed, alive but no longer a threat. Silence blanketed the base. Then slowly, the reality settled in. They'd survived. Impossible, Morrison breathed over the radio. That was, Ghost, that was impossible. Chen lowered the rifle, her hands finally beginning to shake as the adrenaline crash hit her system. She just made the shot of her lifetime with a weapon she'd never fired before, under impossible conditions, with impossible stakes. And somehow, impossibly, it had worked. Tor's voice crackled through the radio. "Sir, enemy forces are retreating. They're falling back into the hills." Without their leadership, without their vehicles, and facing an unseen sniper who seemed capable of impossible feats, the remaining insurgents had finally broken. The assault was over. Chen sat back against the concrete barrier, the captured rifle across her lap, and allowed herself one moment of relief. The sun continued its rise over Fob Viper, painting the devastated base in shades of orange and gold. They'd held. Against impossible odds, against superior numbers, against coordinated assault, they'd held. And now, finally, the long night was ending. The sun climbed higher over forward operating base Viper, its light revealing the true cost of the night's battle. Smoke rose from a dozen fires scattered across the compound. The guard towers stood skeletal and broken. Bullet holes stitched every wall. Blood stained the sand in dark patches that would take weeks to fade. But the base still stood, and the American flag, somehow untouched by the carnage, still flew from its pole near the operations center. Chen remained sitting against the concrete barrier, the captured .50 caliber rifle across her lap. Her hands had finally stopped shaking, replaced by a profound numbness that she recognized from previous missions. The adrenaline had burned through her system, leaving behind an exhaustion so deep it felt like gravity had tripled. She'd killed 29 men tonight, 29 human beings who'd woken up yesterday morning, eaten breakfast, perhaps thought about their families, and made the decision to attack this base. Now they were corpses cooling in the desert sun, their stories ended by her bullets. Necessary deaths, righteous deaths even, but deaths nonetheless. "Ghost." Chen looked up to find Morrison approaching, his uniform torn and blood-stained, a field dressing wrapped around his left forearm. His face was haggard, aged 10 years in a single night, but his eyes held something she hadn't seen before when he looked at her. "Respect." "Commander," she acknowledged, starting to stand. "Stay seated," Morrison said, lowering himself to sit beside her with a grunt of pain. "I think you've earned the right to rest." For a moment they sat in silence, watching the sun paint the desert in shades of amber and gold. In the distance, medical helicopters approached, their rotors thundering across the valley. "I counted 23 confirmed enemy kills from your sniper work alone," Morrison finally said, "plus the 6 you took down in close quarters, and 2 technical trucks stopped with shots that, hell, I wouldn't have believed them if I hadn't seen them myself." Chen said nothing, staring at her hands. She could still feel the rifle's recoil in her shoulder, still smell the cordite and blood. "My after-action report is going to read like fiction," Morrison continued. "One operator, completely outnumbered, turning the tide of an entire battle from the shadows. They'll probably think I'm embellishing." "I was just doing my job, Commander." "Your job," Morrison turned to look at her directly, "your job was intelligence gathering, analysis, sitting in an office and reading reports. What you did tonight," he shook his head, "that was something else entirely." Chen finally met his eyes. "I couldn't watch good men die when I had the skills to prevent it. Orders or no orders, I couldn't just watch. And thank God for that." Morrison extended his hand. "I owe you an apology, Ghost. We all do. We wrote you off as just another spook, another analyst playing soldier. We didn't see you, didn't respect what you brought to this team." Chen shook his hand, feeling the strength in his grip despite his injuries. "You didn't know. I preferred it that way. Being underestimated is often the best camouflage. Well, that camouflage is gone now. Morrison smiled grimly. Every man in this base knows what you did for us tonight. You saved all our lives multiple times over. That kind of debt doesn't get forgotten. A corpsman ran past, heading toward the landing zone where the helicopters were touching down. The base was transforming from a battlefield into a casualty collection point, the organized chaos of medical triage replacing the chaos of combat. "What's the final count?" Chen asked quietly, dreading the answer. Morrison's expression darkened. 7 KIA, Sergeant Mike Hernandez, Petty Officer Jackson Lee, and 5 others. Good men, all of them. 14 wounded, 3 critical but stable. He paused. The analysts ran the numbers. Without your intervention, they estimate we'd have lost 40 plus. Total base overrun within 15 minutes. 7 dead. The number hit Chen like a physical blow. 7 families who would receive the notification. 7 flag-draped coffins. 7 funerals where taps would play while heartbroken loved ones wept. "I should have engaged sooner," she whispered. "If I'd started shooting the moment the mortars hit, maybe." "Don't," Morrison's voice was sharp. "Don't you dare second-guess yourself. You made an impossible decision in impossible circumstances, and you executed flawlessly. Those 7 deaths are on the enemy who attacked us, not on you." But Chen had been in this business long enough to know that logic and guilt rarely agreed. She'd carry those 7 names with her, adding them to the mental list of people she couldn't save, no matter how many she did save. A group of SEALs approached, led by Torres, who was limping on his injured leg, refusing a stretcher despite the corpsman's protests. Wright was with him, along with 5 others, all bearing the marks of the night's battle: bandages, bruises, 1,000-yard stares. Torres stopped in front of Chen and snapped to attention despite his wounds. The others followed suit. "Ma'am," Torres said formally, we all wanted to thank you properly." He reached into his vest and pulled out a SEAL Trident insignia, the gold pin catching the morning light. "You're not a SEAL. You never went through Bud S, never rang the bell, never earned this through the official channels." Chen felt her throat tighten. "But you earned it where it matters most," Torres continued. "In combat, under fire, when everything was on the line, you stood with us, fought for us, and saved us." He held out the trident. "We'd be honored if you'd accept this. You're one of us now, Ghost, always will be." Chen took the trident with trembling hands, the metal warm from Torres' body heat. She'd seen these pins before, knew what they represented: brotherhood forged in the crucible of the world's most demanding training, sealed with blood in the world's most dangerous places. "I don't know what to say," she managed. "Don't say anything," Wright said, his young face aged by the night's horrors. "You don't need to. You said everything that mattered when you started firing from those shadows." One by one, the SEALs came forward, shaking her hand, offering quiet words of gratitude. Some had tears in their eyes, others just nodded, too choked up to speak. These were the hardest men Chen had ever met, warriors who'd faced death in a dozen countries, and she'd earned their respect in the most fundamental way possible. Morrison stood, offering Chen his hand to help her up. "The birds are here for our wounded. They'll take you out too if you want. God knows you've earned the extraction." Chen looked around the devastated base, at the men who were already beginning the work of rebuilding defenses, treating wounded, and recovering the dead. The battle was over, but the work wasn't done. "Permission to stay, Commander. I'd like to help with the cleanup and fortification." Morrison smiled. "Granted, welcome to the team, Ghost, officially this time." As the medical helicopters lifted off with the critically wounded, Chen joined the other SEALs in the grim work of securing the base. They worked side by side, no longer operator and analyst, no longer SEAL and CIA, but simply warriors who'd survived the night together. The sun continued its climb, burning away the shadows where Ghost had worked her deadly magic. But the bonds forged in those shadows, the respect earned in that darkness, would endure long after the physical scars had healed. Chen pinned the seal trident to her vest, right over her heart, and got to work. She had finally found where she belonged. 3 days after the battle, forward operating Base Viper looked like a completely different place. Engineers had arrived with a full construction company, rebuilding guard towers and reinforcing walls. New communications equipment filled the repaired operations center. Triple the original security force now patrolled the perimeter, their presence a stark reminder that complacency was a luxury they could no longer afford. Chen sat in the operations center, analyzing the intelligence gathered from the enemy dead. What they'd discovered was both troubling and vindicating. The attack hadn't been a random assault by local insurgents. It had been meticulously planned over 6 months by a sophisticated network with connections reaching into 3 countries. "The local contractor we hired for base maintenance," Morrison said, standing behind her and reviewing the same reports. "Hassan al-Masri. He'd been photographing our defenses, documenting our routines, sending encrypted reports to a cell in Syria." Chen pulled up surveillance photos on her screen. They knew our guard rotation schedules, our quick reaction force positioning, even where our ammunition was stored. This was an inside job from the start. "Al-Masri's in custody now. He's singing like a canary." Morrison leaned against the desk, his bandaged arm in a sling. The attack on Fob Viper was supposed to be a proof of concept. If they could overrun a SEAL base, they'd use the same tactics against 6 other coalition positions across the region. Coordinated assaults, all within a 2-week window. "Was supposed to be," Chen repeated, understanding the significance. "But we held, so the entire campaign is scrapped." "Because of you," Morrison said firmly. "The enemy lost over half their assault force here. Their leadership is decimated. Their morale is shattered. Intelligence intercepts show they're in complete disarray, pointing fingers, accusing each other of betrayal because they can't accept that one operator beat them." Chen felt no pride in this, only a grim satisfaction that the deaths hadn't been meaningless. 7 Americans had died, but their sacrifice, and her actions, had potentially saved hundreds of lives at other bases. Her encrypted satellite phone buzzed. A message from Langley marked priority. She read it twice, then closed her eyes. "New orders?" Morrison asked, reading her expression. "Rotation. They want me in Afghanistan by the end of the week. New assignment, new team." Chen's voice was carefully neutral, but Morrison heard the undercurrent. "You don't sound excited." "It's just, this is what I do, Commander. I go where I'm needed, do the job, then move on before I become a fixture. Ghosts don't stay in one place." Morrison pulled up a chair and sat facing her. "You know, before this week I would have agreed with that. Thought you CIA types were just passing through, tourists in our war. But you're not a tourist, Ghost. You're a warrior, and warriors deserve to have a home." "I have a home," Chen said softly. "It's just not a place, it's a purpose." Before Morrison could respond, Torres limped into the operations center, his leg still bandaged but healing well. Behind him came Wright, and then a steady stream of SEALs, practically the entire platoon, all filing in and forming a loose semicircle around Chen's workstation. "Word travels fast on a small base," Torres said with a grin. "Heard you're shipping out." Chen stood, suddenly uncomfortable with the attention. "Orders are orders. I deploy in 4 days." "Then we don't have much time." Torres reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box, worn smooth with age. The team took a vote. It was unanimous. He opened the box to reveal a SEAL team coin, but not just any coin. This one was special, personalized with her call sign Ghost, engraved on one side, and on the other, the date of the battle along with a simple inscription. "She stood in the shadows so we could stand in the light." Chen's vision blurred as she took the coin, feeling its weight in her palm. "I don't. This is too much." "It's not enough," Wright said quietly. "Ma'am, you saved my life 3 times that night. Once when you shot that fighter behind me, once when you took out the VBIED, and once when you stopped the second truck. I've got a little sister back home who still has a big brother because of you." Others nodded, murmuring agreement. Each had a story, a moment when Chen's intervention had kept them breathing, kept them whole, kept them alive. Morrison stood and addressed the room. "Samantha Ghost, Chen isn't a SEAL. She didn't earn her trident through Bud. She's CIA, and she operates under different rules, different missions, different chains of command." He paused, letting that sink in. "But she earned something more important than a title. She earned our trust, our respect, and our brotherhood. She's proven that courage isn't about the uniform you wear, it's about the choices you make when everything's on the line." The SEALs erupted in applause, a standing ovation that made Chen's cheeks burn. She wasn't used to this, the recognition, the celebration. She'd spent her entire career operating in the shadows precisely to avoid moments like this. But as she looked at the faces around her, warriors who'd accepted her as one of their own, she realized this was something different. This wasn't about glory or recognition. This was about family. Over the next 3 days, Chen helped finalize the base's new security protocols, trained Morrison's team on advanced surveillance detection techniques, and prepared detailed briefings for her replacement. But in the quiet moments, during meals, during evening conversations, during the work of rebuilding, she found herself part of the brotherhood in ways she'd never experienced before. On her final evening, Chen climbed back to the armory roof one last time. Her sniper rifle was packed, her gear staged for the morning flight. But she wanted to see the sunset from this position, to remember the view from the place where she'd made her stand. Morrison found her there, as she'd somehow known he would. "Thinking about that night?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Thinking about all of it," Chen replied. "How one night can change everything, how strangers can become family, how purpose can be found in the strangest places. You'll always have a place here, Ghost. If you ever need a home, Fob Viper's yours." Chen smiled, genuinely touched. "I appreciate that, Commander, but my home is out there in the shadows, watching over people who don't even know I exist. That's where I'm most effective. That's where I belong. Then the world's a safer place because of it." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the desert in brilliant oranges and purples. Tomorrow, Chen would board a helicopter and disappear into her next mission, her next identity, her next shadow. But tonight, just for these few moments, she allowed herself to be seen. The helicopter lifted off at 600 hours, Chen visible through the window with her rifle case beside her. The SEALs lined up on the tarmac, standing at attention in a final salute to the warrior who'd saved them all. As the base shrank in the distance, Chen performed her familiar ritual, field stripping and cleaning her rifle, the meditative practice that centered her mind and prepared her spirit for whatever came next. Her satellite phone buzzed, the mission brief for Afghanistan, a Taliban stronghold, American prisoners, impossible odds. Exactly her kind of mission. Chen smiled slightly, her fingers moving across the rifle's components with practiced precision. Somewhere out there, men and women needed someone watching from the shadows, someone who could make impossible shots and accept impossible missions, someone who could be the guardian angel that nobody saw but everybody needed. The SEAL trident pinned to her vest caught the morning light, a reminder that she was never truly alone. She carried her brothers with her, their respect and trust a armor stronger than Kevlar. Ghost leaned back in her seat, the rifle now perfectly clean and reassembled, ready for its next mission. The shadow remains, she thought, patient, prepared, eternal. And somewhere in the darkness ahead, someone would need saving. She'd be ready. The end.